Hey everyone, welcome to another Power Monkey podcast. On today's episode, Chad and I will interview Duke VanVleet. Duke is a former NCAA team champion with Penn State University in the early 2000s as part of their gymnastics team. After graduating, Duke went on to perform with Cirque Du Soliel for over 8 years in some of their traveling shows. He is now the owner of CrossFit Rising Wave in the LA area and is one of the top gymnastics coaches in the CrossFit community. Duke gives us some insight into what it's like to be a Cirque performer, what's going on right now with COVID and how it's affecting some of the Cirque performers and all the shows being shut down, as well as now being a box owner, and also some insight into coaching, some tips and cues on some of his areas of expertise, specifically on the rings, where he is our lead coach with our Power Monkey camp. We hope you guys get something out of this one. Duke is one of the best coaches we got. Hope you guys enjoy it. All right, Duke, what's going on, man? Thanks for jumping on the show today. We really appreciate you having on board, coming on board with us. What's going
on? Not too much. Thank you very much for having me. I was actually going to do this from my house, but my wife is teaching my kids right now, so it was better to come to the gym.
As we are all homeschooling now and doing everything in kind of weird spaces. Where are you exactly?
So I'm actually upstairs at my gym. Obviously my gym is closed, but it's quiet. So, and I'm doing all the projects, right now just to keep busy and keep my mind off of, I guess the traps of this situation, at the moment. So yeah, I decided to come here. But we live like 5 minutes from the gym, so it's perfect.
And you're in Los Angeles, right?
In Los Angeles. I'm technically in El Segundo, which is like right next to LAX. I'm literally about a mile away from the host hotel for when the CrossFit Games were in Carson.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. I mean, you got a pretty sweet space out there. Been out there. Gym's awesome. Location's great. How things been affected right now with regards to your gym, your community? How you dealing with everything going on with COVID?
I feel like LA was very proactive. California in general, things kind of seem to arrive here sooner on the West Coast. It's been crazy, man. I'll have to be honest. Like, I think with a lot of people, some days are better than others. But for sure, we're a few weeks in at this point. But yeah, it's been weird. I really don't even know how to answer that. You could ask me the same question in like in a half an hour or 3 hours and I'd have a different answer. But my community's been amazing. I know a lot of gyms are facing different issues with membership pausing and cancellations and things like that. And, I never even had to ask those questions. We're really lucky. I can't even speak to the gratitude I have for my community. Right away, we got a lot more calls and affirmations of, we absolutely want to support the gym and we know how small business works. And, that was really encouraging. We have had to have, the membership pauses, but, they were expected. And, but it's been encouraging, man. I'll be honest. Like, there have just been really great moments of empathy and hope in this time, and so I feel like we're very lucky and fortunate to have the community that we have. They're making this a lot easier on me and obviously my wife and family as owners.
Yep, good stuff. It's been incredible to see the response and really the creativeness from everyone in the community to continue coaching and to continue working out and everything else. Have you been doing anything with your members in regards to continuing to do at-home programming or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hardest part about this is, I feel like I'm working twice as hard
right.
to not lose business.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I think a lot of people think like, because our business is closed, like we're just not there. And like, I'm here every day. Like I said, I'm trying to keep busy and do all the improvements that I've been wanting to do. I'm like, we might as well turn this into a positive time and make use of that time and space. So that's been good. But at the same time, you know, we've had to basically adopt a new business model. Like, I didn't get into this to do this thing online.
Right.
And, you know, not that you can't. Obviously, I think every gym or the people that are doing it are having, you know, obviously varying degrees of success. But yeah, we had to start it right away. We basically, in the first week that it happened here, we went to programming via our Facebook page and just giving demos of the movements. And then, because, you know, again, we weren't in the know, like we didn't know where this was going to go and how long this was going to last. So then when we knew, when they did the first stay at home, or safe at home, as they call it, then it was like, okay, we need to do the Zoom thing. And so luckily, actually, I had another private client of mine who had already been doing it because she's the head of health and wellness for Video Amp. And so they had already been doing Zoom classes. So she kind of gave me a whole tutorial, and it was awesome, man. We jumped in it right away. You know, I'm a tech tard, so a lot of kinks to work out at the beginning and still figuring some of those things out. But yeah, you know, we had to go to it right away, like a lot of people have. And, you know, still you're not seeing the same numbers. Like, it's hard to keep people engaged, and everyone, you know, it's difficult. That's the hardest part, is, again, trying to get the same people that you have in class to show up online. But we are still getting those people to come in, and it's great, man. And it's keeping, I think, for mental health, it's the best. It's the best thing for our members. I think that's the biggest bonus is, you know, our members just being able to see each other. You know, we've gotten some very touching comments and obviously some, again, great support from people who are just like, thank God you're doing this, because I don't know, I'd be losing my mind right now. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just being able to see each other, regardless of whatever the workout is or the lack of equipment or the situation may be. I think people are just finding comfort in, you know, again, how we're essentially communicating now. It's, you know, you take those things for granted in a big way. Even just seeing like your mailman, you know, like when the mail guy used to come up and, you know, sometimes the dog would be out front or whatever, and he wouldn't come, and we'd kind of joke from afar and like, man, I haven't seen my mailman in I don't know how many weeks. And I saw him the other day and I was like, what's up, man? You know, good to see you, you know, with a mask on and gloves. But, you know, you take those little interactions for granted. And so it's nice to be able to, you know, at the very least, just see each other and kind of check up on each other. But yeah, we adapt. We're still adapting, and we jumped in it right away. And I think at this point, if you're not, you know, hopefully this does, I don't know. I mean, we just got another extension. I don't know what you guys got. But yeah, at this point, it's like, I think you have to, you know, I don't think you really have a choice.
Yeah, it definitely makes me, I was just going to say, it definitely makes me wonder, those people that don't normally work from home and that don't work out a whole lot already, what in the world are they doing? I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, I'm already having to come up with a lot of other things to do to keep myself and the family occupied. So it just makes me wonder, man, what are these people that don't already work out doing? Hopefully, maybe they'll get bored enough where they'll start working out and the CrossFit numbers will go up.
Yeah, that's kind of a hope, right? People actually start doing more working out, considering that being in good shape and having a good immune system seems to be like something that's beneficial in the situation. Hopefully it gets people to recognize, hey, you know, maybe I should be stretching or working out or going for a run or doing a home workout. Maybe that's actually a positive that can come out of something like this.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like for you guys. I mean, obviously living in Southern California, I mean, you know, it's pretty beautiful most of the time. And so at least in the neighborhood where, like the area where we live, I mean, the activity around town is crazy.
Still right now?
Well, in terms of like, I'm seeing so many more people get outside for their fitness. And, you know, obviously it's hard to tell. I mean, I know most people are restricted because they can't go to their gyms or, you know, wherever they usually go for fitness. But it's encouraging, I think, as you know, someone who lives in this community where my box is, like, to see people get outside and take their fitness outside. It's weird. It really is. It's like, you know, when you're from Hawaii, I feel like everybody's outside for their fitness. And, you know, in California, you know, again, the gym population is just so huge. So it's also weird, I think, when you're someone who's very sedentary or maybe is at home a lot, to see your neighbors, like when they can't go to the gym, how much they go outside. Because I'm seeing people I never used to see exercise, like go outside, and I think are being inspired by like their neighbors. And, you know, I do think people are coming to the realization that, particularly in this case, your health is quite a defense, is quite a strong defense towards COVID. So, you know, I think it's obviously a very coincidental, strong message for you to take care of yourself, regardless. But yeah, it's been kind of weird. I don't really know how to see. I feel like there are people who are maybe kind of experiencing the fear of not being healthy because of this situation. And I hate for that to be the motivation for people to get fit, but you know, whatever it takes at this point. But yeah, here in Southern California, I mean, man, the amount of people running outside and taking walks, you know, with their families, it's encouraging. So it's kind of nice to see. I mean, obviously weather is different in Oregon, and I would imagine it's still pretty warm in Texas. So, but I think that's been kind of cool to see a lot more outdoor activity, obviously while practicing social distancing. But yeah, I hope I hope it has that effect.
Yeah, I'm curious, Duke. You know, for the listeners that don't know, you know, you not only own your box and work with, you know, individuals from all different backgrounds, but you actually work a lot with high-level CrossFitters as well. It's kind of like a big target audience with your coaching, and you work with a lot of games athletes, things like that. How has that changed? Are you continuing to work with your games athletes and programming for them? How is that a relationship change at this point right now with those individuals?
You know, that never stops. I mean, you know, I've actually been kind of scaling back on that. You know, for my own personal reasons. One, being a box owner is, I think, for anyone that is a box owner. I know, Chad, you know, you were an owner as well. It's tough. It takes a lot of your time, and I you know, having a family, I just have certain goals and priorities, and so the games athlete programming for me has definitely, over the last, like, I'd say 1.5 to 2 years, I've kind of dropped it back on purpose, but I still have definitely a handful of athletes that I still work with, and it doesn't stop. I mean, you know, luckily we're working remotely, and most of those athletes still have access to being able to train. And so, yeah, that hasn't stopped. You know, I think the only person I probably haven't communicated with since this has all kind of really gone down for the most part is Ron Ortiz. You know, I know he's busy. I know he's still working. He's obviously a fireman. But I know he has access to training. And so I didn't want to pile, you know, right now I didn't want to pile those things on to a first responder. I was like, well, maybe he's busier, but we'll probably get a check-in very soon. But, you know, my other athletes, they're still training. The ones that are moving on, like, we don't really know where this is going. So, like, we haven't heard word about the CrossFit Games, which I found to be strange, considering we've heard about the Olympic Games and other large sporting events. And so those people who are moving on to the next portion of the season, like, nothing has changed for them. They're still training. And if they're not training in a gym, they're like, okay, well, what can I do at home? And so, but again, most of those athletes are still have access to their training situation. So for me, in that regards, that hasn't changed at all.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of interesting not hearing about CrossFit Games at this point, huh? I mean, considering the opening ceremonies for the Olympics was going to be, I think, July 24th. CrossFit Games would have been a week after that. So the timelines kind of lined up with each other. And it's just interesting to see that, you know, I know everyone's hoping that, you know, they can keep things intact for later in the summer, early September. But the longer you wait, you know, flights are being booked and tickets are being purchased and, you know, plans are being made and like so many things are being put into place that, you know, the longer you wait, the harder it's to change those things. So I'm kind of curious as to when they're going to make a decision one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought they would just follow suit. But, you know, again, a much smaller scale event, you know, obviously you're not getting the same kind of attendance rates that you would, you know, for the Olympic Games, for the CrossFit Games. But I just thought it was probably just a lot easier just to go with the default and kind of go, okay, like, let's at least put this off. Mm-hmm. You know, they're talking about here, I mean, we just had a recent announcement in terms of extending the stay at home in LA to, I think it's May 15th. And so it appears that this is like the last kind of extension. Basically, this is kind of covering like almost like the last precaution so that we also have time to come up with a plan to implement we'll say, I want to say like restrictions and regulations to returning to business, we'll say, right? But again, like they also said that they don't foresee any large gatherings or events happening until 2021 in LA. Yeah. So I'm like, you know, I mean, obviously as someone who lives in Los Angeles, I'm like, that's crazy.
Sporting events, like no Lakers games.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, like,
dude, yeah, I mean, I it's one of those where like, I feel so bad for, I mean, I should never feel bad for LeBron. But yeah, we were having a good season. I went to a Lakers game, like literally I got to go to a Lakers game, with one of my members because, one of his business partners, he's like, man, I can't get rid of these tickets because the COVID thing had just started. So literally like a week and a half before the lockdown, I went to see the Lakers, a Friday night Lakers game against, who did they play? Minnesota, I think. And, you know, prime time, it was amazing. And then a week and a half later, we were shut down. So, yeah, it's tough, man, to think that we won't have events like that until possibly 2021. So you know, for me, I can't possibly foresee the CrossFit Games happening, but who knows, man? I mean, I'm sure people still want it to happen. So, yeah. I don't really know. I'm kind of indifferent on that situation. Yeah. I think I have no problem with it not happening. But yeah, that decision has to be made soon because logistically it's a nightmare. I mean, you guys know, you know, when you go to the games, it's ridiculous, but I mean, who knows? I mean, at this point now, I think the issue is travel bans and things like that. Like, how do we allow people from other countries to come on over when obviously I think there's still travel ban issues. So
sure.
I don't see how the CrossFit Games can happen, but you know, what do I know?
Hey, it might just have to turn into an online competition. I mean, you know, everything is transitioning.
The Zoom CrossFit Games.
Don't say that, man. Dude, the cheating would be ridiculous. Oh my gosh, we'd find a way.
Fake barbells, dude, fake med balls, fake everything.
You know, I mean, you give someone the window, they'll take it. I mean, we'd love to say like, no, nobody would do that. Yeah, but for sure, there's going to be some dude there.
Well, hey,
the guy who cycled this video years ago, that guy, I was like, when they caught him, I was like, I'm okay. You know, obviously, like you said, Dave, I'm fortunate enough to work with a number of games athletes. And so it's really funny because I feel like for a lot of games athletes, it's like the least of your worries. Like you almost think that like they almost don't watch your video because they're so paranoid about like, oh, you know, they watch the video and they're like, oh, that might be a no rep. And like, you know, and they get nervous. And, you know, you find out later that like, oh yeah, like we weren't worried about it or whatever. So I feel like sometimes the feeling as a coach is like, are they even watching these things? Because I mean, you're getting thousands of videos. There's no way they're watching all of them. And then that dude, like if you didn't watch that closely, I would have missed. There's no way I would have caught that he had cycled it. But you know, I mean, I guess if you look at it and you go, man, this guy is amazing. But yeah, God, I hope someone had mentioned to me that they had seen something that there will be a fittest person crowned, but I certainly hope it doesn't go to a online competition. At the very least, I would like, I guess the UFC style, like Fighter Island, CrossFit Island, CrossFit Island challenge.
I see Castro pulling that off, renting an island for the weekend and flying everybody in.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, with the budget, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what kind of power CrossFit's got these days. I used to think they could do it, but obviously, in light of recent events with CrossFit and their media team, and obviously, I mean, I'm sure at this point you guys maybe have watched the new documentary by, the Buttery Bros. Shout out to those guys. Very entertaining, but I don't know, man. Logistically, I don't know what you could really do if everyone's canceling events around that time. Obviously, you would just push it back, but like, are you going to have, what would be the venue? So many questions. But I mean, that's the crazy thing about this whole situation, I think, is that like, I think immediately you have like, everyone has the same questions, but then like, it's like the ripple effect of all these things happening. I mean, everyone's affected. Like, there isn't a single person or market or industry that isn't affected in some way. And I mean, my friends in Cirque Du Soleil, like, I'm sure you've seen the headlines, rumors of bankruptcy, and 95% of their employees are laid off. And, obviously some of those things are headlines.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that stuff. Really, you haven't been in Cirque for, a decade, and your wife haven't been a Cirque performer. And, are you still speaking with any of your Cirque friends? I mean, my college roommates are in Cirque, and, I know from the gymnastics community, it's something that, is very prevalent after being a gymnast. But, you were in it for so long. I'm just kind of curious what you've heard, because that too is just something that people love, that,
dude, it's tough.
Could potentially be gone.
Yeah, those people, I mean, and that's a kind of industry too, where like, again, you don't expect it to rebound once this thing lets out. And especially if we have these restrictions in terms of large gatherings, how do companies like that survive and make it through this time? So, my friends, actually, we had a show here in LA, Volta, which is Cirque's newest show. It's been out for, a little over a year. They were moving to Orange County. I actually took my coaches as a gift to the show, and one of the guys who we used to work together on Corteo, is now a coach and still an artist on the show, and so he gave us a backstage tour and everything. And as soon as this happened, he's actually from China, and so he's like, I'm not going home. So his wife is Bulgarian, and they're like, they just rented an apartment in Irvine, and they're like, well, we're just here. So we're just going to stay here and hang out. I mean, they're lucky in that they're the kind of artists that obviously, put some money aside. And, when you live the touring lifestyle, I like to joke that there's two kinds of people. There's the kind of people who like save everything, like they're saving for whatever when they come off tour, or, they have goals for their earnings. And then there are those people who are just like spend that shit as soon as I get it. I'm a rock star, I'm on tour, I'm a party. And but yeah, most of my friends, I think that like touring artists, the ones that were here, I think a lot of them stayed here and just rented a place. But the ones that did return home, again, it's one of those like they don't know. And like my friends in Vegas,
you're never based in Vegas, right? You were always on a traveling show.
No, I was always on a touring show. Yeah, so we toured the world, for the most part, for like 7 years straight, and then we, basically took. I left Cirque, and then ended up going back, for like an emergency contract to help out. But yeah, roughly about 8 years of touring, better part of a decade with Cirque Du Soleil. So. A long time on the road, but very different work environment for sure. Vegas is a whole different beast.
Think about Vegas right now. Like, okay, the Cirque shows, but even if they say, all right, Vegas is open again, like, people going to go? Like, are you going to go and be in like a casino of people coughing all over the place? And like, I mean, it's just, I have no idea what things are going to look like, but you know, those people that do live in Vegas and are performers in Vegas, it seems like such an unknown as to what that whole city is based off of people congregating together, you know what I mean? And this whole industry is based off
I mean,
of
again, like those are the unknowns. Like, I mean, there are so many industries and so many jobs. Like, I mean, you look at the airline industry, you know, because where I live in El Segundo, you know, we've got Boeing, and we've got, you know, SpaceX is right down here, but a lot of the aeronautical and aerospace companies are right by the airport. So, you know, we got a lot of employees or members that work for these companies, and it's an interesting time, man. I feel horrible for certain industries. My friends that are still, you know, a lot of our friends still work at Cirque Du Soleil. Definitely worried for them, you know, and I think nobody could prepare for this. Like we said, it's talking to my kids about this. It's like this has never happened. I don't know. And so, you know, I don't know. Like, that's the other question that I have is, how long is it going to be before we forget how bad this was? You know what I mean? Like, because life will have to return back to normal. People will go back to the casinos. People will go back to watching. I mean, God knows we want our sports, right? Like, I want to finish the NBA season. I absolutely want college football and the NFL season. So, you know, but that has to happen at some point. But how slowly or how progressively are we going to do that? Because for sure, like, it's going to linger for a while. You know what I mean? Like, anytime someone sneezes, you're definitely going to look at them and give them, you know, stink eye, like we say in Hawaii. You know, you're just going to be like, but I mean, how long does that last before we're back to normal? And you're just like, you know, we're the same gross people that apparently don't wash our hands or use hand sanitizer. Right. Again, you know, so yeah, that's the hard part, is like, what's going to be like, what's that window look like? Because for sure, like, I'm not going to think about, I mean, even just going into your gym, like, I'm thinking about it as an owner, like, how hard is it going to be for people to come in and get back into it? You know, I mean, I'm a germaphobe. I'm totally like, I'm a germaphobe. I'm one of those people, like, I get bugged out by stuff like that for sure. And I know for me, I would have an interesting time being stuffed into a gym. Like, cause you know, people like, bro, when the gym's open, they're going to come back hard for sure. The ones that can. And like, you know, how we can't just let everyone in the gym at the same time, because we're just like, again, we just solved that problem. And so, you know, I'm interested to see what kind of restrictions or regulations they kind of come out with. Is it going to be based on like square footage? Or are they going to go like, oh, you can have so many people per square foot in your gym? Because there's no way you can be like, oh yeah, come on in and sweat and sneeze and like breathe all over each other.
Right.
COVID's past. Like, those are the questions that you know, they just continue to go on. Like, you can get lost in a dark tangent of like, how is this going to happen? Are they even going to let gyms open? When are they going to stop? When are they going to start letting everyone go into the grocery store? You know, like, that's a weird one. Is it like that? I'm assuming it's like that for you guys now at this point, where you're having to wait in line outside the store. And I mean, it's pretty fast. You know, I think a lot of people complain for sure, but here anyway, it's like, I mean, you're outside for like 10 minutes.
I'm not complaining, man. Those people are, you know, still stocking those shelves. There's still food on the shelves. Those people are putting themselves in harm's way every single day. I'm not complaining about standing in line for a couple extra minutes. That is not the thing to be complaining about at this time.
Well, and I think that's a great thing to say, is that everything right now is really about perspective. And, you know, it just, I mean, oh man, I'm so guilty of it. Like, you catch me on the wrong day. And you know, I'm acting like it's the end of the fucking world. Excuse my French, but it's just one of those where I just get, it's tough to stay positive right now. You know, like, again, I try not to watch, it's funny, like, thank God for things like, dude, Netflix stock. Oh my gosh, they must be, everyone's blowing up, you know, like my friend works for Apple TV, and she's like, oh my gosh, I've never been so busy. So, but yeah, thank God for the distractions, because like it's easy to get bogged down with the negativity, and on the wrong day, like I feel like I'm ready to just give up and I sell the gym. I'm like, anybody want to buy the gym? But you know, other days, like you're right, it's just about your perspective and the fact that we're super lucky, man. You know, to be able to still go get stuff. It's just hard. I've been getting myself, like catching myself and just being negative Nancy and like, oh, this sucks and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, but at the same time, like I get to spend so much more time with my kids, which is so rad for me. You know, and the little things, I think, you know, trying to just find the little positives in everything, but it's tough some days, you know. It's good to have people like you, obviously, and other people around you that are like that. But yeah, the grocery store thing, I mean, it's just weird. My wife saying like, "Oh, we went to Target. We had to wait in line for 20 minutes outside." I was like, I don't know that I could do that, but I'm glad that you did, you know, and I'm glad that we can. Gas, like gas is so cheap. It's awesome. Right. I mean, you guys, bro, in LA, it's crazy. The fact that we have winter gas in LA, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. We don't even have winter. What are you talking about? But like gas, it's so nuts, like how cheap it is. And, you know, but again, the other side of that is like, I have a lot of friends who work in the airline industry who don't have jobs right now, or like, you know, a friend who's a pilot who's like, oh, I think I just flew my last flight for that company like last week. And I'm, you know, he's a young kid and living in Manhattan Beach, like trying to make it. And, you know, it's tough to hear about those things, but they're happening everywhere. So again, perspective is kind of the key to getting through this, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting how different people are handling this. I mean, for myself, I felt like, no problem, I'm going to handle this easy. I leave if I'm not traveling somewhere, I leave the house maybe for a couple hours, only a couple days a week, just to teach a couple CrossFit classes. But I'll find myself every now and then just being a little bit down and having, you know, a few moments or an hour or two of kind of depression feeling. And I'm not used to that, you know? So it is interesting what being forced to stay in your house or being restricted does to you. And so for those other people that are definitely more extroverted and used to being out and doing more things, it just makes me wonder how in the world they're getting through, and hopefully they're finding things to keep themselves busy and ways to occupy their time and their energy. But, you know, another thing we wanted to get into, Duke, kind of switching gears here, is obviously you're a Power Monkey coach, and, you know, at Power Monkey Camp, you spend a lot of time over there at the ring station. So we want to kind of give the listeners out there,
something positive, something positive.
Yeah, something to work on, right? But
I think that's you know, what's been really great about this is I've actually, you know, I've been a lot of my like you guys said, I'm lucky enough that I get to coach at Power Monkey, and so I have a lot of, you know, private athletes or clients that I meet with throughout the week and that are working on things like muscle ups, and so. I've gotten a lot of messages of like, oh, well, like goodbye muscle ups, and like the tears are like, okay, let's just calm down a second, hold on. All right. And I think it's important too for people to also understand, like, I think, and Dave, you probably can recognize with this more than maybe Chad, but like to give certain skills a break. Like when I was a gymnast, there were certain movements that I would just like almost overanalyze or get into because the technique, it was so much technique. Like I remember, like, nobody knows what I'm going to be talking about here, but Dave will. But like when I first learned a Kovacs, like it was one of those movements where it took so long to develop technically, and then when you got it, you were so thrilled.
Can you explain what
like,
Kovacs is?
Man, the slightest. So the Kovacs is like when you're swinging on the high bar, okay, and you see a guy like on the Olympics, and he's swinging around what we call a giant. Right. And he lets go and does 2 flips, or essentially 1.5 flips over the bar, and catches and goes back into swinging. Right. So very, very difficult move at the time when Dave and I were younger. Like that was like you had, if you were if you were on the national team, it was like you had to be doing that release move or something comparable to it. And so, it took so much time to learn all the drills and all that. And then you get it and you're like, yes. And then you have to do it over and over again. Obviously not to the volume that we do CrossFit, but you just start to overanalyze and overthink it. And a lot of times I always tell people, like, in gymnastics, like, your head is a lot of times what messes things up. Like, you've done so many reps, your body knows what to do, but you overthink it and you overanalyze. And, so, again, taking that back to people who are working, say, on muscle ups or on ring skills, they can get really anxious about, one, not being able to practice. And it's like, okay, you may not have your rings at home, but there's lots of ways for you to, again, continue to develop or work on the components that are going to make you better at your muscle up. Like, I can never stress that, like, you can't do enough, like, push-ups or versions of dips. I think that's the number one thing that I think determines your confidence and ability to, like, at least go for a muscle up. It just gives you, again, it's like that confidence pulling yourself under the bar. Like, that's something you gain only through reps and just being in that position frequently. So, there's lots of ways to work on that. But become a student of the game. Like, find the footage or the videos, whether if it's of yourself or of your favorite coach or of your favorite athlete or of your favorite, like, we'll say, what do you call it? Social media influencer. I send people videos of Dave all the time. Like, if I don't know if I don't know how to describe it, like, I can only so eloquently do that. And even when you write it, like, what you think makes sense, people read it and they're like, I don't know what that means. So, I'll just go through, like, I'll kind of go into one of those weird Instagram K-holes, and, like, you start searching one thing, and I actually just start saving videos in reference to give people that I work with an idea, because if I don't have the ability to film it myself, which I do, but sometimes you're just somewhere else where you can't do that, I'll look up Pamela Gagnon, who's another wonderful athlete and coach. Like, regardless of our differences of opinion on techniques, there's a lot of wonderful tools and drills that everyone incorporates I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people incorporate that are very useful. So, again, I think just because you can't, like, maybe physically perform your movement, I think mentally being able to see the movement, like how you want it to look ideally, and visualize that is something that you can practice. And so, again, I think, like, when it comes down to becoming better at whatever, whether it's a sport or a movement, I know for me personally, you had to become kind of obsessed. And so, like, I definitely don't want people to become obsessed, but I think it's also important to go, okay, like, if you have footage of your own movement, good, study it, like, can constantly study it and try to see what your coaches are talking about, and try to see if you can see that in others as well. Don't become someone, obviously, who's like, we'll say a technique, or all of a sudden a gymnastics snob, because, you now have a basic understanding of technique. But, it's always good to be able to recognize that, because I think ultimately my goal as a coach for especially, like, games athletes and athletes who are competitive is to give you the ability to self-diagnose. Yeah. And so, nothing's more frustrating than watching an athlete on the floor, in particular, like when they're competing, like, fail reps and they're not changing anything. Right. And so, again, it's like, it's not a strength issue or an endurance issue. It's the fact that, like, you are not changing technique or making the appropriate adjustments to your technique. And so that can be frustrating. And ultimately, what I want athletes to be able to do is recognize when they perform, either specific portions like we do, we can feel right away, like, I didn't do enough of this, or I didn't do enough of that, or this was weak. And you're making those adjustments rep to rep to rep, especially in the CrossFit realm, where that's happening at such a large rate. Like, again, it's not how we teach we don't do this kind of stuff like in our sport this way, but we have to appreciate the fact that you're going to be doing large volume. And so I think self-diagnosis becomes really important for athletes. And the only way that you can do that is by learning to recognize it, not just in yourself, but also, being able to see it in others without, again, being negatively critical of those athletes, using it more as like a study tool for yourself. And I also like people, I tell people all the time, people complain to me about like when I show them a video of Dave, for example, or myself, and they're just like, that's unrealistic. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean it's unrealistic? And it's like, well, I'm not quite at that level yet. So I want to see like what it's going to look like. And, you can try and like not dumb it down, but we'll say take some of the virtuosity out of it. Right. And so, but again, it's like they don't like, I feel like it's hard sometimes to get people to understand like this is how you should be focusing on your movement and positions and ultimately moving this way. So I feel like this is the clearest picture, but sometimes you go, all right, let's get some footage of someone like in the environment that you're used to that you like. And so, whether that's like Katrin or like Sarah or Tia, and let's go, okay, like, let's watch their muscle up and let's talk about the things that we discuss and see if you recognize that. And it's difficult to do that too, because as you guys know, those are extreme tests. And so to watch technique when someone's at the CrossFit Games is like, I tell people all the time, it's like one of the worst examples because the factors that are involved in that are so extreme that like, it's not even, it becomes about survival. And so when you watch someone, I know for sure that when I watch, like when I used to work with Sarah, when I watch her do muscle ups by themselves for technique, they're amazing. When she's got to do 30 of them in the middle of a workout, like they look a little different, and again, it can be tough to do that as well. But yeah, if you physically can't, get on the equipment, like, again, mentally prepare yourself. I think mental or visualization in terms of how skills happen is super important. I know as a gymnast, that's something we worked on, to prepare for competitions, like where you mentally visualize going through your routine. I think being able to see that, the actions of the muscle up and, again, almost closing your eyes and seeing how that happens or how it occurs is really important as well. I've definitely been one of those athletes who's had a dream about a movement and like been able to make it in the dream and then gone into practice and realized like how I saw it in my dream is how I should see it in real life. And it's astounding how the mind is so powerful over your body. Whereas before that dream, I couldn't see the movement. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I couldn't visualize how it happened, but the second I could see it, it was crazy because I woke up and I was like, oh, that was such a rad dream. Like I felt like I could do it. And for sure enough, you go into the gym and like, for some reason, it's like your brain opened up that dimension is like, you can now see it like this. And, it changes how you can move. And so I definitely believe that, your mental capacity to perform movements is just as important as your physical capacity. I mean, how many athletes do you know that have the potential to lift much more, but like mentally they're not prepared to do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like muscle ups is one of those skills where people like they psych themselves out. I don't know, again, I can't really identify as well with that as others, but you see it. You see people who are like crazy strong and super fit. And like when it comes to like that transition for whatever reason, like, their brain just won't let them get over that mental hurdle. Yeah. And it's, I think that's also important too. But I mean, man, if you can physically still work on your muscle up, we had lots of tips.
Yeah, I think there's a few things you mentioned in there that are pretty valuable. I'd like to just kind of touch on a few more. I do want to get that answer from you too. If you do have access to rings, what are some tips on muscle up? But just to go back to the one comment that you were mentioning about, having watched Sarah do muscle ups fresh versus watching a CrossFit athlete in the middle of the CrossFit Games, in the middle of a crazy workout, completely fatigued on the third day, and someone analyzing that muscle up and using that as their guide to how that they want to do a particular skill, it's a missed opportunity. And it's really unrealistic to say, okay, this person is maximizing their technique because of the environment that they're in. And I think that's such a good point that, when you're watching, an athlete that you admire and someone that you want to emulate and your idol within the sport, it's always so critical to try to understand whether or not the technique that they're using is efficient and if it's optimal. So I think your reference to Sarah being fresh and using good technique in one scenario and then it looking very different in another scenario, and someone maybe just watching that because it's the most readily available video that there is of her doing it and saying that's how I want to emulate it, it really is a missed opportunity. I think listeners really need to take advantage and understand that technique also needs to be looked into more. So don't just watch and emulate, ask more questions. Is that kind of what you're trying to get towards people when they're looking at something? And
yeah, I mean, I think I love and appreciate the fact that, that's what we did, right? Like when I was a young gymnast, it was like you found those one or two guys, you're like, I want to do it like that. You know what I mean? And so it's just the natural thing of what you want to do. Now, again, the bad thing about CrossFit is that, again, your better athletes, you still see a lot of great technique. I mean, there's no doubt. I definitely don't want to take anything away from, especially someone like Sarah, but, guys like Matt Frazier, obviously, and everyone there at the top levels, but that's the goal, right? The whole point of CrossFit is to introduce so much stress and so many of these factors and to see how you deal with that, right? How does your technique last as we introduce this or as this gets worse? And so, I mean, that's the test. The goal of the programming is to get you to fall away from technique. And so that's the problem is, like you said, the readily available footage of our favorite athletes generally is from the competitive arena. And so, again, like the CrossFit Games, it's for those people who haven't gone. And I always tell people, like, you should go at least once to spectate and really see how extreme it is, because you don't really get a sense of the fatigue and like the totality of the weekend unless you're there. When they edit all this stuff and you watch it on, whatever you can watch it on now, you don't, other than like right after the workout finishes and they fall over, like you don't get the feeling of how hard the day is. Like you don't see them in the back. Like they don't show them in the back dying and laying and seeing a Rosti and in the cold tubs. And so, like that's the thing I think people forget about is like when you watch the footage, even at regionals, right? It's the same thing, or sanctionals now. These athletes have been through a lot. So depending on where that movement showed up, again, like when I was working with Sarah and even Bjorgvin Gudmundsson, like when they would do muscle ups like outside of workouts, I mean, dude, it's ridiculous. Everything's high catching and like, the swing is beautiful. And I mean, you could take a video and post it and be like, boom, that's how you do muscle ups. And then the workout starts and, those muscle ups maybe show up at the beginning a little bit, but then they quickly fall apart. And so, but again, that's the point of CrossFit. That's what's supposed to happen. But again, you get your ambitious young athlete, who is again doing all the programming and all the extra stuff, and then they watch this and they're like, that's how I want to do it. And you end up having, hopefully you're lucky enough to get your hands on them and work with them as well and kind of go, okay, like, yes, this is a good athlete to watch, but like, this isn't like, if you were to ask this athlete to do their 1 rep max muscle up, so to speak, it wouldn't look like this. You know what I mean? I kind of compare it to people like that. Like your 1 rep max snatch is a very different output than like, your snatch at whatever Isabel weight or Grace weight,
Yeah.
or your clean and jerk Grace weight. Like you're putting out a lot less there, and you're able to deviate a little bit from like exact technique because you're dealing with volume. And now again, it doesn't mean that it's allowed, but the likelihood that it's going to show up is much higher simply because of the number of reps you're having to do. And so, regardless of the parameters or how they set that workout up, it's just going to, again, it's expected that it will fall apart. And being that you're repeating it so much and so often, again, it's so hard to do 2 reps exactly alike. So, but people don't think about that. They don't think about that. They just think about like, oh, this looks awesome. I want to just throw my hips like this and I want to catch like that. Right. And again, they're not getting to see Sarah or whoever like break that movement down and just do an amazing single. Like how often I program muscle up singles for people. It's, and we do it in different ways, but again, it's like one of those things where how often do you do snatch singles and clean and jerk singles? Like you do the singles perfectly over and over and over and over, regardless of the weight or the load, simply because it just means that you're going to have a higher likelihood of doing large volume much closer to correct. Right. And so, but people don't look at gymnastics that way. And that's the other unfortunate thing is that like we'll warm up every piece of the snatch. Like we'll do a Bergener warm up, you know what I mean? To warm up one lift. And then, you'll break it up and all that. How many times do you see people like break up a muscle up really on their own? Like it's like they do one, they warm up one, like, all right, let's do this. We're good to go, man. It rarely is it a situation where someone on their own accord is going, okay, I'm going to do like 3 sets of 5 swings and I'm going to do 3 sets of, my swing to ring row. And then I'm going to do like 5, turnover drills. But I mean, when you think about a barbell, like it's almost, for me, it's almost automatic that I need to do RDLs, high pulls, muscle snatches, push press, like just to do one snatch. But for a muscle up, you'll hop up and do 3 swings and a crappy single that you don't dip out of. And then you're just like, let's do this 30 with 30 snatches.
Well, to your point, Duke, I think, you talk about it makes more sense to people, or they're more likely to do that with the Olympic lifts, with the snatch, for example. You keep saying snatch, and every time you do, my heart rate goes up because I get to talk about Olympic lifting, right? But I don't think people even do that for snatches and clean and jerks enough. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
what
no,
you're describing,
sure.
like they need to be doing that to a greater extent as well. They need to be spending time doing singles with lightweight, with medium weight, and then kind of on up from there. But, in comparing the Olympic lifts to gymnastics, and specifically the muscle up, I think is very regularly compared to a snatch. And I think they are very comparable. And honestly, for many different reasons, but a big reason to me is the overthinking part of it, which you mentioned earlier, and the underthinking part of it. And this really hit home for me back, it was a number of years ago now, maybe at least 5 years ago, maybe even 10, I have no idea. But I was trying to do muscle ups, and I could do a strict muscle up from the very beginning. The first time that I tried, it probably wasn't pretty or anything like that. It was, I'm pretty sure I chicken winged it, you know what I'm saying? But I got up there, but I was capable, I was strong enough to do that. Started doing more CrossFit and started trying to run multiple reps together, like you said, pretty quickly with no warm up, no drills or anything like that. and I kept missing the first rep, and I kept missing and missing and missing. And so I stopped myself and I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? What are you trying to accomplish? And I've realized that I was trying to execute too many things. I was trying to execute this, 2, there's 3, okay, 4, 5. And then also, while I try to do these 5 or 6 things, let me not do these other 2 or 3 things that I know I'm not supposed to do. And so I said, what do you do in a snatch? You execute what is most important. You execute 2 or 3 things at the most. And so I broke the muscle up down to the best of my knowledge, and I focused only on 2 or 3 key actions. And part of that was making sure that I was taking my time and setting up appropriately. And guess what happened? I started making the muscle ups again. So I think the overthinking part of it is huge. And also the underthinking part of it. I mean, you do have to tell yourself to do at least a few things, a few key components of it. And maybe we can get into that a little bit more as well. But before we do, you talked about something that people can do while they're at home to work on their muscle ups. And I love that recommendation of actually think about it, think through the muscle up. And hopefully when you're doing that, it's a good muscle up, but go watch video. And you and Dave have been describing specifically, make sure that video is good footage. What is the ideal muscle up look like? And that's what I need to learn. But what are some other things that they can do? You mentioned push-ups and variations of dips while they're at home with little to no equipment. If they are doing push-ups and dips, Duke, how often should they be doing those? How many days per week? What do the reps and sets look like?
I mean, I think it just depends like how often you're working out. I'm assuming if you're someone who is trying to attain a muscle up, you're working out pretty often. So depending on what your programming is for that day, like, the old rule of thumb for gymnastics was kind of like we ended, I mean, at least for me, we would end the day with like 30, 20, 10 push-ups unbroken. And then that became 50, 30, 20, 10. I don't think anyone needs to go that far, but
you're talking to CrossFitters though. They'll probably take that.
They'll do it. Yeah. And but again, it becomes more about something of positioning. So like, especially with the push-up, keeping the elbows in tight, like, I can't stress how important that is for people to understand, like doing a push-up like right here, like an alligator kind of, I would say, is so good for your dip. And like, they suck for a reason. But they're so good for that stability, especially when it comes to keeping the elbows in tight for your dip. So, it's not so much about the numbers. It's more about, it's always about positions. And I think that's a great thing that you mentioned as well, is like for the Olympic lifting, there's so many similarities and positions are it for sure. So, I would definitely say like, there's no reason to go past like 50 to 60 reps in a day. Especially if you've done like, say, a lot of pushing in your programming with everyone being at home, there's a lot of burpees and a lot of push-ups happening already. So if you're able to get that variance in there with your own equipment or whatever, great. But yeah, there's no need to get crazy with it. I would say when it comes to like pressing, whether it be in the push-up or like the dip position, I would probably try to stay under 50 to 60 reps total for those two movements if you were going to do them both. I mean, dips, again, it just depends. But once you start getting out of 50 reps, like I think you're going to introduce a fair amount of fatigue and soreness there. And if you want to be able to do that, like this is more like introduce it daily. You know what I mean? Like I kind of like the number of 30 a little bit, like do 30 focused, beautiful reps where you're pausing at the bottom and really, again, focusing on full extension. I think that's the issue that people run into, is that your bottom positions aren't strong. Kind of like the bottom of a squat. Like if you don't have that bottom squat position, well, of course, your ability to receive the barbell in whatever movement you're doing is going to be lacking. And so
Dude, don't get me started now. Come on now.
That's also the biggest fear, right? Is like, that for people, their biggest fear in the muscle up is that like falling through the rings.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do you fight that? Well, you sit in the bottom, and you just get strong there, and you get strong in all those ranges, but specifically the bottom. And so it becomes, it's really easy to take 30 push-ups, which doesn't seem like a large number, and make those push-ups exponentially more fruitful and difficult by just going, okay, like let's spend 3 seconds at the bottom every rep, especially if we're doing a bench dip, if we're doing dips between chairs or whatever. Like if we can't get off the ground, that's okay. Like just keep your feet on the ground, but let's sit at the bottom, like get that range of motion, open the pec and bicep up. So, it's not this horrible experience or like this roll of the dice every time you land at the bottom of a muscle up as to whether you're going to get hurt or not. Like introduce that stimulus on a very progressive, safe way, so that at least when you come out of this period and you can get back on the rings, like you feel your shoulders feel better. They're a little bit stronger. And then we can really get back to the meat of what you've been missing out on. But the other thing I would recommend for sure for people is just hang more. If you're gonna, I think any time that you're gonna push, right, and put yourself under, like, I like the idea of push pull always, like in everything that you do. So if you're gonna do more push-ups to improve your positions in relation to your muscle up, then you should do the opposite of that, which is pull. So find a way to do that. And I think hanging is a very simple way where, like, even if you don't have rings or whatever, like, hanging is good for you. It's good for your shoulders. And I think that's one thing people forget how to do, is that they don't know how to, like, completely hang through the bottom of a kip or a ring swing. And, like, Dan Pope, shout out to Dan Pope, that dude. I think half the stuff that I did with Dan when I was just coming off of working for Cirque Du Soleil and rehabbing my shoulder, like, I think I took almost every exercise he gave me and made that a part of, like, programming for athletes, because they were so applicable. Like, they just made sense. Like, do these scat pulls and hangs and all this stuff, and, like, it's good for your shoulders. And, like, you make your athletes do that and go, like, look, you should do this not simply because it's good for your muscle up, but also, like, it's good for your shoulder health. So, obviously for people who are listening, check out at Fitness Pain Free, Dan Pope. So he's got so many good shoulder movements that, like, again, they translate literally to the CrossFitter so easily and so well in regards to your kipping movements, whether they be on the bar or rings. But hang, you don't, just because you don't have a set of rings up high or even down low, doesn't mean you can't find something to hang on and do scat pulls, forward scat rolls, backward scat rolls. Being able to understand the shoulder and how you use it is really important, because what you find is that people generally tend to overwork the swing. They don't really know how to relax through the bottom at the appropriate moments. And so, there's absolutely a point where we're going to use all those wonderful muscles of the shoulder. But at the same time, we need to get you to understand that there needs to be length through your shoulders at a certain portion of your swing. And I think a lot of times, because of the old CrossFit cue, like active shoulders, right? Like, that's something we always taught, which is right. It's not wrong whatsoever. But when it comes to dynamic movements, again, there's a portion of the movement where you absolutely can't have like an active shoulder, so to speak, right? Because you're coming through the bottom. And so, but most people don't understand that. And for us, like for Dave and myself, it's such a simple thing for us to be able to, like, be long and then be tight through the rest of the body. And for other people, they're like, that's not possible. Like, as soon as you tell them to be tight, it's like, they just lock it all up. And so, getting people to learn how to do that's a difficult thing, and that's something you should do at home, like just being able to hang and really relax, and again, like, make it applicable to your overall health. Even if you can't swing, like, we can still encourage good we'll say shoulder health while you're away from the gym.
Yeah, I've got definitely a couple questions on that, probably more so than Dave, because Dave knows more so exactly what you're talking about. But again, very relatable to the Olympic lifts. When you receive a bar overhead in a snatch, it's confusing to people. And I spend a lot of time, explaining this, that I want your shoulder to be relaxed down. I want you to receive relaxed, and relaxed may not be the right word, but it's a good, it's a punch. I want to give you that punch and say, I want you to relax overhead, because I want you to understand the extent of the point that I'm trying to get across. But it's about a coordination. That doesn't mean that I receive the bar with noodle arms, and not engaged. It means that I'm coordinated in such a way that it looks relaxed, right? It looks relaxed, and it's very strong and powerful at the same time. So I want to come back to specifically how you would cue someone to hang. But before we get to that, my daughter Ella has been doing a lot of ninja stuff, and I've been having to build on her swing set almost every day, adding bars and stuff like that she can jump around, and she makes me do it as well. So we've actually been doing a lot of pull-ups out there and long hangs, right? So wanted to ask both of you guys, what is a good max hang from like a pull-up bar for someone to be able to
time?
Yeah, time-wise.
Oh, dude, if you can get outside a minute, that's pretty good. I mean, not a lot of people can hang that long.
She can do 3 minutes.
Really?
Yes. 3
Damn,
minutes with her. 3
that's
minutes.
No joke.
Yeah. So
that's
obviously, and to my point, one of my points is I've been meaning to ask you that day for a while, but I've been able to work up to 2 minutes, which I was pretty proud of because I'm terrible with capacity with pull-ups, right? I mean, my grip is strong and everything else, but for whatever, I think because my butt and my quads are so heavy, that's what I'm going to blame it on. All the squats.
Take the lifters off, take the shorts off, make it as light as possible.
No, I got weightlifting shoes on out there, Dave.
Exactly,
I mean, come on.
Right.
But, my point is when I'm hanging for 2 minutes and I'm doing that long hang, my shoulders are not engaged. I mean, I'm hanging there. The only thing that's really tight is I'm keeping my legs together, keeping my feet together. And I've also got a grip on the pull-up bar. Is that the hang that you're talking about? Do you want them to hang like they're going to hang for a long, long period of time?
I look at that as a little different. So I look at, 2 minutes for me is kind of a marker that I shoot for my higher level athletes to be able to hang from the bar. Kind of gives me an indication as to whether or not it's a strength of theirs or not. Right. But to Duke's point, I think he makes the absolute correct point in terms of shoulder activation when it comes to hanging, and understanding that when you're using dynamic action, that gravity is now working on you in a new way. And if you have a shoulder angle and you're thinking about an active shoulder by pulling down and creating that lat activation, you're creating an angle. And you're creating what we eventually see as slack. The more dynamic action you have through the bottom will lead to more slack, the more angle you have from that shoulder. And that slack will lead to the complete pulling of those joints, the stress that is unnecessary that's coming onto your shoulders, elbows, wrists, lower back. All of those angles is what we're trying to stay away from. We're looking for straight lines and curved shapes so that we can create fluidity through our swings. So that's why we want to be strong in, yes, an active pulling position. We want to be capable of that, but we also want to be in a position where our shoulder angles open at 180 degrees. So we come through the bottom on something dynamic that we can actually use it properly, and slack ends up turning into tension and maintaining tension. And that's what we want. We always try to kind of like convey tension being our friend and slack being our enemy. So that kind of relates back to what you were talking with an overhead position, Chad, of kind of depressing the shoulder to be able to be relaxed and catching, as opposed to pressing out and expecting that to be a comfortable catch position with 200 kilos overhead or whatever it might be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can snatch 200. We'll say that.
Whoever's doing that.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean, right? I mean, those are kind of exactly what Duke was talking about there. But hanging is about hanging for duration. I look at it as doing handstands for duration. And it's about conservation of energy.
Yeah.
It's about not using any unnecessary muscle groups to waste the energy that's keeping you on the bar, keeping you inverted, or keeping you with an apparatus in your hand. You're trying to maximize only what's needed to be able to complete that movement. So if I'm hanging from the bar, it's probably going to look a little bit different than if I was swinging from the bar. You know what I mean? Duration versus precision for technique. I look at those as slightly different. I don't know how you would view it, Duke.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a specific test, right? It's like you tell someone like, oh, if you train to do max push-ups in a minute, and then you put them next to someone who doesn't do that very often, and it's going to be really tough to beat that person because it's a very specific test. And so things grip for time. Yeah, like you said, it's one of those now if you said, okay, do max pull-ups, that affects the grip completely differently, right? Now your technique plays a factor. So, again, I think it's tough because a guy like you, Chad, who's strong, you may fatigue super early on pull-ups, but you can hang on the bar for 2 minutes, which is, again, I would generally say that if someone can't hang for a minute, then they have some grip issues. We need to build their grip. Once you're outside of a minute, then it becomes, okay, you're strong enough to hang on the bar and probably perform some kipping movements, and we can get some higher level stuff in there. But yeah, it's different depending on the weight of the person. My kid does parkour, so he can hang on a bar forever. But You take someone who's a power lifter and
Mm-hmm.
a little more bottom heavy, right? Like yourself, like you said, big, strong legs. I mean, simple physics is going to be a factor for sure. But regardless of the fact, grip strength in terms of just hanging is very different. Like now when you start talking about toes to bar and, pull-ups and bar muscle ups and things like that, then then your technique starts to play a factor. And like we said, that whole hanging thing, right? Like when Dave talks about those angles, like one of the things that I think people forget is like the second you do one of those things, like, where you, again, I tell people all the time, like the second that like you bring tension, usually a cue that I give people is like, try to relax your face and your neck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what happens is people like right away, like you bring tension and then everything gets pulled down and we activate everything. And I'm like, I want you to think about having like a double chin, like I want you to be as like as fat as possible in your face. And there's, I know we're not working towards that, but that's what it should feel like. Like you're just like, or I tell them to think about feeling their shoulders, like touch their earlobes, really feel that, like that length. But, you're absolutely right. And so, again, if the minute they bring any sort of tension, starting at the hands, and now again, that's the only tension we want. But when you overdo it, like that completely changes how you get through skills. Now, you may not hang that way, right? If you said, okay, hang for as long as possible, but then we go, okay, Chad, like let's do toes to bar. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm gonna turn on my lats and death grip the bar for the entire time. Well, then now we're seeing your capacity as it applies to movement, which is very different depending on your technique. So, but yes, again, I think the good thing about hanging is that you see right away, naturally, people will start to relax. It's why your climbers are so good,
right?
Because like you watch a gymnast, like it's so funny when Jonathan Horton did American Ninja Warrior, and then you watch a rock climber do American Ninja Warrior, and it's two different styles.
All upper body gymnasts.
Jonathan Horton's like all biceps, dude. He looks like a gorilla up there, And then you watch a climber, and it's like everything is done long arm, extended in their lats, right? Like they've found the most efficient way to move and hang at the same time, And like that's why it's always tough to beat those guys, because they're experts at hanging and moving, and traversing. Gym is different. We're experts at hanging and moving straight up and down. We're not generally having to move through a friggin' course like that. Our course is very specific. It's like you stay on this right here. And so, how you hang becomes, it's a key position. It's just like anything that we do in Olympic weightlifting, that overhead position, although very different, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the stacking of joints and things like that. But yeah, I try to tell people, I tell people all the time, like, it's amazing how different our sports are, yet there are so many parallels and similarities in regards to, positioning, like even like coaching methodologies. Like you're talking about two of the most technical sports in the world, and like you put them into a sport like CrossFit. It's so ridiculous how it's like we have, like the whole motto of CrossFit is like we're not specific athletes, like we do everything. And it's like, yeah, but you just took like two of the most specific, like technically specific sports in the world, and you expect people to be really good at them. And and the coaching approaches are just so different, I feel like, for the most part. So it's really tough to get people out of the mode of like CrossFit training and into the mode of like gymnastics or Olympic weightlifting training. Like the timelines are just so different. And like, that's the hard part to get people to do, is like, how do you tell someone like, you need to get like, I want to do 30 muscle ups unbroken. And you're like, you need to be able to swing for 2 minutes. And you're just like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, if you can't, I tell people all the time on rings, I'm like, if you can't swing for a minute, how are you going to do 20 muscle ups? Like, it takes at least 2 to 3 seconds a muscle up. And that's if you're like decent, right? And like you want to do 20 of them in one go. So like, if you can't swing for a minute, and I mean swing efficiently and beautifully and be like, oh, no problem. Like, chances are you're not going to be able to do that. And you tell people that all the time. I tell people, I like to program like, okay, you have to swing for 10 seconds and then do a muscle up at the end, or like a set of muscle ups. And people are like, dude, it's horrible. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what you don't realize is 10 seconds, although it doesn't seem like a long time, that's a long time to be hanging on the rings. And I mean, you're talking about like, you want to be able to do, okay, how many muscle ups do you think you can do in 10 seconds? Let's give you 5, right? Let's give you 5. And you want to be able to do 15. So let's take away the first 5 muscle ups. Let's swing for 10 seconds and then do a set of 10 at the end of that 10 seconds. And, you know, again, we're just building capacity and we're able to focus on the technique of the swing, like feel it, bro, get smooth. You know, you don't want to waste that energy. And, you know, again, like we're having to reintroduce the principles or the basics of your swing to get you to believe. And it's like, you know, it's so hard to get people, high level athletes. Your best high level athletes, they got no problem. They'll tell you like, okay, I'll go back and do it. China Cho,
right? She
used to call me up when she first started training with Rich. She's like, Duke, don't give me any more gymnastics, like in terms of volume. She's like, I don't need that. Rich takes care of all that. She's like, I need you to make me do the basic shit because that's the stuff that I need that we don't do or that he doesn't program. Everything is like, let's do all this. And so, you know, again, how you're addressing technique is a different approach. We can talk about that in terms of programming, but it's got to be about going back and doing the basics. Like I would imagine that Dave, like at Penn State, we would have one day a week where we would go in and do basics. Like, you know, maybe we do dismounts as well, but you would go in and like your day in the gym would just be spent doing basics, like to some degree. Whether it was like a basic routine, it just depended what time of the year it was. But like sometimes it was like a basic routine to your dismount, you know, but everything was just about remembering the fundamentals because you get so concerned about working high skill levels or putting routines together that you start to just get away from the basic, the things that make you successful, that make all this happen. And so, we can get caught up, you know, especially with CrossFit. Like there's so many facets. Like I got to get better at running. I got to get better at weightlifting. I got to get my back squat up. I got to get better at this. I got to get better at that. And it's like, dude, you're trying to stuff 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag. And some of this stuff, like you can't do them at the same time. And so, you know, again, it becomes CrossFit just, it can work against you in a lot of ways when you really, especially when you're specialist coaches like us, because we have very strong feelings about how to address certain movements and progress through things. And like the biggest problem with CrossFitters is there's no patience. And like, I've had that athlete that's amazing. And you're like, dude, there's so much potential there, but you got to go back and fix this shit because if you don't, like, it's just going to end up giving you problems in the future when they ask you to do something more advanced, which always comes, right? Like I always say, we're not thinking about CrossFit this year. We're thinking about CrossFit like 5 years from now. Right? What are they going to ask you to do? And so if we don't fix this now, and it's just like, you just get that kid or that athlete who's just like, they only see right now. Like, I got to be better at this right now. And it's like, dude, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back a little bit, work on it. You know, okay, we're going to get to 30, but like, it's just going to take a minute, you know, and then you get that breakthrough, right? When you can convince someone like, let's fix your basics. And then they just keep working. They hate it. And they keep working. They hate it. And then finally, like, it clicks. It makes sense. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, why didn't I do this? And it's like, you know, but that's our life. We're so used to that because of the sport that we're in. That's everything that we did. And I think we also, as specialists, you know, or subject matter experts, whatever they call us, whatever the fancy title is, I think we forget sometimes too that our patience is extraordinary. And like, we absolutely understand that, like, you got to go through a 1-year squat cycle, you know, to add to your max, or like, you know, I have to do everything short of taking steroids to be able to do ring strength, you know, at the high level in elite gymnastics. Like, man, I remember, God, those training sessions just to be able to hold a strength position on rings for like 1 more second, or like make it look a little bit better. Like the amount of grinding and sweat and pain that went into that, like, you know, we understand.
Yeah, I don't think you can really fully appreciate it. It's years sometimes for 1 second. It's years for 1 second, right?
And
just like it would be years for another kilo on the bar.
Yeah.
Well, they want to come to one clinic and be like, oh, you have the secret tools. And it's like, no, man, this is like months and like maybe years of you working on this before it becomes what you want it to be.
Yeah. And it's the same in every field. I mean, again, another example from my daughter, she wanted, just yesterday, I was watching a skateboard video with her. She wanted to learn how to do an ollie, right? And already in my mind, I'm like, I coach enough and I teach enough to know that this is something that's going to probably take some time. You know, you're not going to be able to pull up a video and most people, you're not going to be able to learn that, right, in a day.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that the guy says, which I've saved the video because I'm going to go back and watch it again, I think is a great teacher. He said, look, this is not something that's most likely going to happen in a day. If you haven't even spent, I don't remember how much time, but a certain amount of time just skating around town on your board, then go do that and come back and see me, basically, you know? So it's that basic concept of getting comfortable on your board. And if you're pull out a skateboard for the first time and you pull up this video and you want to do an ollie, like that's the wrong sequence of events. And that's, you know, everything that we always try to get across with Power Monkey and the way that we coach. And it's that way for everything. And I'm sure that the listeners out there, if you're, you know, your day job, you can relate it back to that in some way. You got to do the basics in some form or fashion to be good at what you do. And, you know, to backtrack a little bit with something that you were talking about as well, basically you're saying quality over quantity when you're doing these push-ups at home and making a change by keeping the elbows in. And that's a big thing. And to kind of build on top of something else that you said earlier, Duke, you were talking about somebody needing to change something, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to an individual that has missed a weight, for example, say 5 to 10 times, and I try to get them to do something different. I try to give them a different cue, and yet they're doing the same exact thing over and over and over again. Finally, I'll go to them and say, look, you've missed 5 times or 10 times, whatever it was. You have to do something different. And at this point, I don't even care what it is. I just want you to be aware that you do something completely different. Even if you miss it again, just change something. But my point with that is I'm trying to make a point as to how important it is. For example, if you're keeping your elbows out in a push-up and your hands are really wide, whatever it is, we need you to do those different. We need you to make a change. And here's a great opportunity while we're stuck at home and maybe you're going to follow this advice and do 50 push-ups or 50 dips, you know, on whatever days that you're doing them. Find a way to make that change. Keep your elbows in. That's the one thing that Duke is telling you that you need to do with these push-ups. So make that change.
It's easy now because no one's around, you know, like I think that happens at the gym.
Right.
It's like, you know, even when you get with your buddy, like, oh, let's work on these together. It's always like that little ego comes in where it's like, I got to do these faster than you, you know? I see it. And it's just like, dude, like, do it as if no one's there. And now you're by yourself. So like no one, it doesn't matter about time. Like sit at the bottom, like bench dips. I love bench dips because it's one of the very safest ways to introduce that stretch, which is the biggest risk, right? Mm-hmm. Like that pec, everyone's worried about that pec and the bicep, and it's the easiest way to like change your position. You don't even have to fully load, you know, your shoulders and triceps. And I think that's the other thing too, right? Is like people wonder why gymnasts are so good on the rings. And it's like, because we live in support. Yeah. I mean, the amount of time that we spend in ring support and on like parallel bars or whatever, parallettes, like you can't make that time up. And like, how often do CrossFitters get on parallettes even? Not often at all. And so
that's like a rest position. Support should be a rest position.
Yep.
Our strength, like on top, is just like, it's one of those things where people just don't understand. I'm like, your confidence with a muscle up depends so much with just your confidence and ability to be on top of the rings, regardless like of how you get there. But just the fact that like you can be there and have that confidence, you know, again, like practice your supports, like all those key things that Dave and I talk about in the support position. I mean, dude, holding a support with the rings out, you can't tell me you don't have 2 chairs in your house that are the same height and you can't like turn them out a little bit, get that external rotation, and lock the elbows. We always tell you, right, stable surface before unstable. And so there's so many creative ways just to practice your support. I mean, what people don't understand is as gymnasts, like if we're always doing pommel horse, parallel bars, rings, right? Those events, with the exception of floor and vault, are all upper body events where we are supporting ourselves via our upper body. And you just can't make up that time only when you do muscle ups and rings.
Right.
Like it doesn't work that way. So, get in support positions. The push-up one is probably the most common without having to do anything with your house. But like the bench dip, like even if you just hold the dip position locked out and hold the bottom position, just working on, again, your positions at the end ranges, the bottom and the top. Work the middle a little bit, maybe some holds there. Don't even worry about movement, but work on your end positions and make those perfect and spend time in them. Like, if no one's around, like it's the perfect time. You're not having to race anybody. And that external rotation that everyone is so afraid of doing in the gym on the rings, like, how many times I tell athletes who are strong enough to like lock your elbows and turn their rings out, but they're afraid of looking stupid because they're going to look weak in their support. Well, now you don't have an excuse. Like no one's going to see you struggle with that. Cause it's hard, man. Even for me, like as a gymnast now, I still struggle with it, and we did it for years. But you do, like, it's so humbling when you see someone who's like, I have a 250-pound snatch and like a 315-pound clean and jerk, and then they get on the rings and they're like, I can't hold a 10-second support. Right. They don't want people to see that, and it's like, it's okay, I get it. So do it at home now that you're stuck and get better. But yeah, I definitely. It's always, you don't have to glamour it up, and like CrossFit, they like the movement, they like the sexy movements. It's all about like pushing up and pulling up and doing fast and this and that. But gymnastics and the things that make you better are the details and working the boring stuff, which is the positions. And like, that's the hard part to get people to do. But, being that you're limited, it's actually the best time to do it because you don't have a choice. So work on your positions. And like, I think I stole this from you, Chad. I think I heard you say this to one time. I think it was like one of the first times I was at Power Monkey. You're like, when your positions are perfect, generally the movement to and from them, like between them, will be better, right. And it's like, you could completely deviate, but that it's somehow like your body's got to get back to this position at the end of it. So chances are you're going to find the right way to get there as long as your start position is correct and your end position is correct. And so, but again, we just get so caught up in moving dynamically in particular that we lose sight of the key stuff, which is always going to be your end range positions and your ability to be comfortable in them.
Yep, love it. And
you're spot on, Duke. Absolutely.
Yeah, and continue to give me credit for that. I'll take it. Absolutely. Any credit that I can get.
Well, I think that's the one thing that people don't know about Power Monkey that have like never been, is that, I mean, I steal so much from people at Power Monkey. It's because the information is so good and it's so well delivered, and like it makes sense in not just CrossFit and like what we're talking about, but with anything that you do in life. Like, I mean, a lot of these things, they apply, right? Like, whether it's your job or, again, anything in life, like it just comes down to like building yourself a solid foundation. But like, when it comes to the coaching at Power Monkey, like that's one thing I wish people understood. Like, again, I've obviously encouraged people to come. I've had a lot of my members come. I actually helped pay for some of my coaches to come because I said, look, if you can get a week off and you can go to Power Monkey, I'll help you go because it makes you better to me as a coach. Like part of my job as a coach is to develop my coaches as well. My goal is in all honesty, is to get them to a point where they either get offered a better position as a coach, or they want to do this thing on their own. Of course, I would love to be able to make my coaches, earn large sums of money, but that's difficult to do in the CrossFit industry. But, I want them to have that education because, what you learn at Power Monkey, whether you're an athlete or a coach, it's huge, man. Like, I really wish that they did the L1 kind of like that. I think anyone now knows, most of you guys most of our coaches at Power Monkey have an L1 and have been through it. But to hear, it's so nice to have the transparency and the communication among the different facets of Power Monkey. Like, I think the big complaint in the past was like, Dave, you used to work for CrossFit Gymnastics. Chad used to work for CrossFit Weightlifting, and that, like, what you would learn in the L1 would completely contradict what you learned at, say, CrossFit Gymnastics, right? Like when they would teach certain gymnastics movements. And, like, you would ask those questions, like, or you'd see those questions come up, and the answer was like, oh, well, we're not the same. We're technically not like working together, right? They were their own kind of individual things. And so there wasn't this carryover. Like, if I went to my L1, they were going to say exactly what Dave said, and like they were going to say exactly what Chad said. No, you'd hear some interesting things. I remember the first time I did my L1, or the time I did my L1, some of the things I heard on the muscle up, I was like, what? I'm like, no, I would never tell someone that, and I definitely don't want to. I loved, to this day, I drank the Kool-Aid long time ago, dude. I loved my L1, but that was just one instance where I was like, oh, I probably wouldn't choose to like describe that cue that way. But, again, I was enjoying the Kool-Aid, and I was like, hey, let's get into this. But that was a problem of the past. And, I've learned since then that they don't choose to teach certain movements at the L1 anymore. And, but I think that's the great thing about Power Monkey is that, like, everything carries over. So, like, when you come to my station, I'm like, you guys, I'm like, okay, you saw Dave? Like, okay, Dave said this for sure. Like, I know Dave said this because I stole it from him already. So, but it's one of those where, like, I know the information is carrying over. And, like, what I want people to understand is, like, when it comes to at least gymnastics, right? Like, this stuff is universal. Like, what I say here applies there, and vice versa, and should continue to apply to the other facets of, like, gymnastics within CrossFit, and even to some other things, right? Like, we constantly draw comparisons with Olympic weightlifting, but that's the thing, is that you can trust that the information is the same wherever you get it, and, like, it builds on itself, and it's just like, it's cool. It's like having an amazing, this is a weird analogy, but imagine like you're like a Lord of the Rings fan, and it's like you have like all the greatest narrators reading you the same, like they're reading a chapter to you, like they're just kind of rotating through, but like Dave did chapter 1, Chad did chapter 2, I did chapter 3, and so did chapter 4, but like you're just getting all these amazing narrators to tell you the same story. And, that's what's really cool, is like it all comes full circle, and you see that even if how different the events may not, but, oh, I'm getting a call here. Look at that. And like, I think that's the really cool thing, is that it's like everyone's working together. It's like this conspiracy to give you like we're all just giving you the same message, just a little bit differently, It's like, it's like, oh, did he talk?
It is a conspiracy. I knew it, Dave. I knew it.
And those kind of little things happen, and that's what's really cool. Is like promoting the same like messages for the most part, without having to tell each other, and like that's super cool. Is like, it's not like we got together and had this conference and we're like, okay, the message for today is, you know what I mean? It's like it. Yeah, it just comes out.
Hold your in ranges. That's it. Hold your in ranges.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Super
one message
about Power Monkey in terms of learning. Like I think that's one of the reasons why people experience so much success, is because it's like you're constantly given the same messages, right? The same feedback. It's like, when you keep hearing it over and over, it's like you're going to do it, or you're going to make that change, or whatever it may be. So I think that's. Again, Power Monkey, I wish, well, of course, I wish we could do it more. But I wish it was better utilized by CrossFit. I wish they saw it for how instrumental it can be in terms of really promoting good movement. I think the knock on us was that like we had shitty movement for the most part. I mean, I laugh at it all the time. Dude, I laugh at the memes, when people are like, what the hell is that pull-up that you guys do? I laugh all the time. But, like, I feel like Power Monkey is like the answer to that. Like, here's how you tell people, like, it's got to be about, the quality of movement. Like, we have to evolve, because the problem is like CrossFit is no longer what it was in 2008 and 2010, where it was like this weird kind of branch of people who were getting together every year and doing this weird fitness festival and drinking beers. And it's no longer like that. It's not like that anymore. Like, it was cool then. That's why I wanted to get into it. And then it became this like crazy sport. And people, like, it's so funny when people, I mean, I live in LA, so everyone knows about every fitness, fad that, like, it's all here. And like people's feelings on CrossFit are so funny to me. And I can't deny it, because we do. Like, there's sometimes you watch stuff and you're like, oh man, that doesn't look good at all. And so I feel like Power Monkey is like, that's CrossFit. That could be CrossFit's answer to like, here's how you're supposed to move. Like, this is what people thought we did, but this is how we actually do, but it's a long process to get there. But this is where you come to like, to really learn how to do it. Or this is where your coaches come, or they should come, so that we can make people move better. But, I guess that's probably in a perfect world, that's my dream for, I guess, like what Power Monkey should be. But, that's your baby, bro, but
we're just here to help. We just want to help, Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we all love CrossFit. It's definitely changed our life for the better, and we want to be a resource. I think that's kind of our whole goal, is to just kind of help people get better and look at things from a certain perspective that comes more from people that spent their whole lives doing a particular sport, specific expertise, and hopefully that helps translate into people becoming better at CrossFit and moving well and being able to do things for the rest of their lives. That's kind of the main goal. It's not to train the next CrossFit champion. It's to train the everyday person to be able to move better and play with their kids.
And I got to thank you,
have a better quality of life. And that's kind of what we try to help with.
Most people don't know this, but Dave introduced me to a client of mine. His name is Mike. Shout out to Mike if he's listening. Probably not. He's probably on a call trading stocks or something. That dude never stops. But I met this guy. Get this story. So this dude, he works in the finance industry. Amazing. So much energy, and just like, he gets after it, like the kind of guy you're like, dude, you need to slow it down. I tell him all the time. And so he's walking in New York, and he walks by by Solace, and he'd had this bug to like get into gymnastics, and he decided to stop out in front of Solace, and guess who's sitting outside? But Dave Durrani, and I think Sully was sitting with you or something. And he's like, hey, do you happen to know anyone who might be able to teach me gymnastics? Like, and I was like, of all the places this dude could have stopped and walked, you know what I mean? Like, on the street, bro. And so Dave starts to work with him, and he just happens to like, he kind of goes back and forth between New York and LA. And so now he lives here permanently. And Dave, introduced him to me and was like, if you want to continue to work, I have this friend Duke. So I started working with him. It's been like 2 years, I think, maybe longer. And I want to bring this up because like, he's one of my favorite people to work with because it's just horrible to say, but he's not a CrossFitter. Almost everybody I work with is a CrossFitter. I have a couple other athletes that I work with that are not CrossFitters, and they just want to use gymnastics as fitness. And about you, and but he's one of those people where I'm like, I would love for more people to realize the benefits of like training, not just gymnastics. Obviously, you're getting a lot of calisthenic athletes these days too, but it's amazing to see gymnastics used as a fitness medium, as opposed to just like an aspect of CrossFit. And I think that's the really cool thing that like really opened my mind or eyes to what Power Monkey can do and like what you had the potential to do. And I thought it was ridiculous years ago because, you know, when we were gymnasts, like nobody, like, you know, we didn't see it like that. I didn't see it like this. Like, you know, I didn't think I'd be doing gymnastics for my fitness in any way. I thought I'd have to go to, you know, gyms and do the dumbbells and barbells. And like the fact that now we can seriously talk about and see, you know, people already using it as their medium of fitness is so huge, regardless of what the sport of gymnastics is going through, you know, on an international scale or nationally as well. Obviously, with the things that happened the past few years, it's at least we have. I always say better late than never. Like, you're not going to see a whole bunch of adults try to become professional gymnasts.
It's not the point, though, right?
But yeah, you're seeing those adults put their kids in gymnastics.
Yeah.
You know, and see the value of, like, you know, the guys that used to make fun of me in high school and college that still make fun of me. It's all good. You know, I have a good sense of humor about it. Always have. But, you know, they talk to me now and they're like, oh yeah, my son does gymnastics and, you know, this, and, you know, usually it's always like my daughter does gymnastics, right? But now I'm getting like, oh yeah, my son does gymnastics, and that's super rad, you know? So for me, like, just the fact that gymnastics, you know, CrossFit had opened the door to that, you know, is enough for me. And obviously I'll do everything I can, along with Dave and everyone else to, you know, I guess widen the horizons of those possibilities. But dude, it's amazing, the appreciation for gymnastics and people like us. Like, dude, why do you think I got a degree? Because I was like, no one's ever going to care about my information of muscle ups. And, you know, it's how I make my living and support my family. So I'm so grateful, you know, to not just Power Monkey, but to Dave, because like when you first brought me on, like I remember when I saw you on the update show when I was still on tour, and I was like, I couldn't have been happier that CrossFit had chosen Dave as their. I was like, dude, you couldn't have a better ambassador to the sport of gymnastics. Like, for someone who like gymnastics should look like, and people need to have an idea of like, oh, like I was like, this is amazing. So, you know, when I first came back to the States, like I wanted to work with you guys so bad. I was like, Dave, please call me.
Well, things worked out pretty well.
Called, you know, and but it's just amazing, like what you've been able to do and opened people's eyes to what we did and continue to do. And like, I mean, half the people I work with, like I met because of Power Monkey, at least half, if not more.
Yeah.
You know, like that first camp, after that first camp, it was like, I met, you know, Ron, and because of Ron, like, you know, Ron and I are now like best friends, and, you know, just the relationships that I've built simply because of my, you know, my relationship with Dave and Power Monkey. It's amazing. It really, I can honestly say, like from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much, because I wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't like for Power Monkey and you guys, like, and I don't think people know that, like, you know, I wasn't at the first one. And so when I started this with you, I had no reputation or no presence in CrossFit. And like, strangely enough, you gave me a platform, like, you know, and you introduced me to some great people. And I think, like with anything, I think all great people surround themselves with great people. And we continue to see that with the coaches that come and the people that we meet and have long-lasting relationships with. But yeah, man, Power Monkey changed my life in a lot of ways that I didn't even realize, you know, until now. But, you know, and I think that's the one thing that I want people to understand that are listening to this, is that even from a coaching perspective, like I went in excited for sure, but it was more like, oh, I get to coach and like, it's going to be fun. But I came out of it definitely richer in friendships for sure. You know, and I've gotten more work. I've gotten, I don't know how much more knowledge just going to camp, like, and sitting in on people. And there's been nothing but positive effects from Power Monkey. And it's just one of those things where it's that way on every level of my life. As an athlete, when I was still training, when I was still trying to go to the games and crazy like that. And, as a coach who was trying to, build their name and reputation. And now as an owner, as a person, we've all kind of grown together over these last 5 years. I feel like people having families and, we're seeing these transitions of our lives together. And I'm eternally grateful, man, to you.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate those words. And we love having you on board. Can't tell you how much the campers appreciate you as a coach as well, and just a friend. Yeah. We always send out our surveys and ask people what their experiences are like. And every camper's like, man, Duke, MVP again. Mm-hmm. It's every camp. People come back just talking, just speaking you up like you wouldn't believe on those surveys, and they just love working with you, and we love having you on board. So can't tell you how much we appreciate you and your attitude. Obviously, your technique, you know what you're talking about. You work so well with people. You're so patient, but it's more about who you are as a person than it is about what you know. So we really appreciate you being on board and taking the time with us today. And hopefully, the listeners will get some good information out of this. But we want to be able to kind of direct them to you as well. Can you kind of give us a little bit of information on where you're at and how they can find you on social media and websites and things like that?
Yeah, man. I'm, like I said, I'm kind of a tech tard. So when I say that, sometimes people send me messages other ways that I haven't seen ever. So if you do want to get a hold of me, you can shoot me a message on Facebook. I'm listed there. Also, my Instagram is probably easier. You can just DM me. I don't know what the kids say, sliding into DMs, what that means, but
what's the handle in case the people aren't watching the video?
It's at VanVleet D. You should see it there in the bottom corner. Again, at VanVleet D. Just my last name and then the first initial of my first name. So hit me up there if you have any questions. I actually do. If you have videos and stuff, I'll take a look at it and kind of let you know what's going on. Again, it's hard just to kind of diagnose things, but I'm always down to help any way that I can. And obviously just touch base with some of you. I know some people I'm hard to get a hold of, but yeah, hit me up and we'll almost always message you back. It may not be in a timely fashion. Remember, I am a gym owner with 2 young kids in this coronavirus crisis. So I'm trying to help my wife. I'm just trying not to let my wife divorce me, pretty much is what's going on right now. Okay?
One day at a time, one day at a time.
Right. Dude, every other day it's I don't know how that day is going to end. My poor wife, God bless her. But you can find me on Instagram and then message me on Facebook if that's not working. But
Perfect.
I also want to say, man, Power Monkey, you got to come. If I know this last one, the one in May, obviously got canceled. But to my people that were coming from here, they're already we're going in October. I think I got one more trying to come in October. So
Love it.
You guys got to come. It'll change your life. It changed mine for sure. And man, I couldn't be happier to be a part of this group. And I love you guys, man. And I just love working with people. Yeah. Anything that you can do to better someone's life. I'm just lucky that I get to do it through fitness and my sport. So I want to thank you for that. And man, thank you very much.
Well, Duke, man, we love you as well. And for the listeners out there, take him up on that offer. He'll, like you said, he'll get back to you. You'll certainly learn a lot, and he'll be able to help you put those muscle ups together, right? And give them some drills to do while they're there at home. Talk them through that a little bit more. It was a pleasure talking to you, Duke. Look forward to, hopefully we'll see you at camp again in October if this thing doesn't get delayed past that. But
I'm putting that juju out of my mind for sure already.
Yeah.
But
guys, yeah, absolutely. And for the listeners out there, guys, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com to keep up with upcoming services and events. A lot of things are on hold right now, as we've been mentioning, but there's a lot of cool Zoom stuff going on, so you can keep up with that there. Also, check us out on Instagram for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, also at Dave Durante and at Ollie Chad. We'd still like to hear from you through an email as well. You can reach us at podcast@powermonkeyfitness.com. Let us know any guests that you'd like us to have on, any questions that you might have for us to answer on the show, anything like that. We want to know about it. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. And until next time, guys, stay safe and thanks for listening.